What's up my loves? My name is Paige, this is Pages with Paige, and today we're going to be doing my July wrap up. Hello, so welcome to this video. Today I want to talk through the 9 books that I completed in July. It was a very weird reading month in terms of the fact that I had a tendency to not read for days at a time, and then I would binge 2 books or a book in a very short period of time and then spread like one out over 5 days but not actually be picking it up every day. It was just very weird for me and not my normal reading style. I don't really know where this has come from. I don't particularly like it because I enjoy reading, and I know that I just prioritized a lot of other things, which is fine. I don't know, I had a fantastic reading month with the things that I've read. Overall, it just felt really odd. So I think my description of the mid-year freakout tag for how my reading year has been going so far with oddly is still continuing into July. I want to talk through the stats and then talk through the books. This is going to be more rapid fire. I'm really not feeling 100%. I apologize, my coherency and minimal amount that there normally is will probably not be here either. Let's dive into the stats. Like I said, in July I read 9 books, which equated to 3,605 pages. Whilst this was on par for the smallest amount of books read, it still held a lot more weight with pages. So in February I also only read 9 books, but I didn't even crack 3,000 pages. So it definitely was a better month in terms of sizing. This equated to be 116 pages per day, which was really surprising because of that sporadic reading. But when you average out the fact that I finished 2 books in 2 days or 3 days, balances itself out. In terms of pages per book is 401, which I think is the highest I've had this year, reading slightly bigger things with minimal small ones. So I had one that was in the 200s page range, I had 3 in the 300s, 2 in the 400s, and 3 in the 500s. My average rating was a 4.28. I read 6 fantasy, 1 historical, 1 horror, and 1 sci-fi. I read 1 complete audiobook, and I had 8 books with physical and audiobook combo. I read 1 middle grade, 2 young adult, 2 new adult, and 4 adult. I had 1 3-star, 1 3.5, 3 4 stars, and 4 5 stars. I read 4 standalones. I started 2 new series, but I did continue on with 1 series. I caught up with 1 and I completed 1. I also DNF'd a few more series than what I mentioned in my series update. Just when I was unhauling books, I decided that the series I weren't going to continue with. One of the books on my TBR was The Plains of Passage, and I have DNF'd the Earth Children series. I couldn't face a 900-page book that I just didn't care. My mum had told me that the series doesn't get better, and I just had already lost interest, so we decided to scrap that. And the second I did that, I did have a lot of reading mojo come back. My biggest book was The Invisible Life of Addie, which was 541 pages. My smallest book was Matilda, which was 232. I had 36.2 listening hours, and publication I had 1 from 1988, 1 from 2006 to 2010, 6 from 2016 to 2020, so that was actually 3 in 2017 and 3 in 2020 I think, and 1 in 2021. So let's dive into the actual books. The first one I read was The Windup Girl by Paolo Balagalupci, and I gave this 3 stars. It was a very interesting read on climate change, on consumerism, on the treatment of women, but it just didn't feel right. There were so many things that were just so male focused that made me so uncomfortable that for a 500-page book it was a slog to feel invested. I know that my mate really enjoyed this, and I did save it from an unhaul pile because of his recommendation, but I don't think I had enough care in the story as it was, and I knew that I'd read other things that were more engaging for me that didn't take such a heavy male dominated focus when talking about a variety of different issues. Not to say that we can't have male dominated, but I had ones that were done better and in a way that was more palatable to me. This was a lot of businessmen being the forefront, and I just didn't vibe with it. So not a book problem, definitely a me problem. It just wasn't my style, and that's totally fine. So 3 stars, very average for me, but I could see that it would appeal to a lot of different people in a different capacity to me. And this also fulfills a prompt for my Advent challenge, which is to read a book that has the same initials as you, which was given to me by Crystal. So that one's checked off. Next up, I read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and I gave this one 5 stars. This was a perfect atmospheric book for me. I thought it was really creepy, and the way that everything sort of played into one another just hit all the right uncomfortable notes for me in a pleasurable way. I don't think this is the scariest book. It is not the most horrific book, but the way that it went about it just really resonated with me, and the atmospheric nature of it was beautiful. So it's definitely one of those that is going to sit with me for a long time, and I don't think that newbies to the horror genre will find this as scary. It is definitely more the atmosphere. I appreciated the way that the plot went. I didn't really know how I was supposed to take it, and I feel like the conversations on colonialism and the eugenics was done really well. I was so uncomfortable with the characters in this, and I loved it. I felt that it really just did what it was trying to do amazingly. So I definitely had a blast being uncomfortable reading this. The next book that I read was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and I also gave this 5 stars. I didn't have as emotional a resonance with it as Ash did, but him and I being able to have discussions and moments together from reading the story so close together really added to the experience of reading this. I think I would have found it beautiful anyway, but just having that extra personal element to it was so super lovely, and it means so much to me because of it. Poor Ash came over and sat next to me while I was just sobbing my eyes out, and I just really appreciate Schwab's writing. I feel that this isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea, but it was just so beautifully woven. I was there, I was in it, I was completely absorbed with these characters, and then I just found their story so fascinating. The concepts that Schwab chooses to follow was really interesting, and I loved having LGBT representation in the 2 protagonists, so I very much found a lot of comfort in this. Next up, I read Matilda by Roald Dahl and gave this 5 stars because when do I not? This was just the perfect comfort read for me to read after Addie LaRue and reset my palette. I needed something quick and easy that I felt comfortable with and could just fly through. This is my go-to, and I've been keeping up my yearly reread, alternating between July and October, and this year was July. I love this. It is so beautiful just being able to sit with a character that loves books and is courageous and wonderful. This just has such a place in my heart that I can't not reread it every year. Next up, I read The Song Rising by Samantha Shannon, and I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed where we went with this story. I felt like it was a lot of moving the pawn pieces in the bigger game to get to where they need to be rather than continuing the plot, but I just appreciate that her characters are so multifaceted, and whilst Paige is a very irritating protagonist because of their lack of self-confidence, it is also something that you need to develop, and she is only 19. So it makes sense. I just am like, come on girl, you got this. You fucking beat the shit out of everyone at the end of the last book. You can do this. But I know that we're in for a ride where we go next, and I'm very curious to see where we actually go with this series. There's one more full-length book that we're reading as well as a novella, but I don't know where this story is going to end up. We are definitely expanding on the world in the next one, but where does it end? So I don't know, but it definitely has me very excited to find out. Next up, I read The Sky Beyond the Storm by Sabaa Tahir, and this is the 4th in the Ember and the Ashes quartet, so I have finalized it off. And I gave this 4 stars. I think it was a really solid conclusion. I enjoy seeing the characters. I'm not mad at a happy ending every so often, even if there is a lot of death in the process. And and I thought it wrapped up well. It wasn't the most climactic endings. It definitely had a lot of a softer taper out, but again, I didn't mind it. I was just having a good time listening to it and being with the characters once again. It wasn't the same high as An Ember in the Ashes was, but I still feel like overall this is a really good series. Next up, I read The Bone Witch by Rin Chapeko, and I gave this a 3.5. I read this while doing a jigsaw puzzle and really enjoyed it, but there was nothing that stood out as anything spectacular. I really liked the narrative format of jumping between past and present and having the parallel timelines running, and the fact that they didn't intersect at the end. I really appreciate the character and their growth, and it has me intrigued to continue on. I just felt I've read this story before. Not necessarily with the bones, but the similar sort of premise. And so unfortunately for me, it just didn't spark that same love and passion that I like having in my books. I'm definitely going to continue on with the series because I can see that it is going to shape up, and hopefully I will get to them sooner rather than later, because I know that it is important to keep the story fresh and separate in your mind. So hopefully this series will continue on a positive trajectory, but the first one was a fun read and I'm very happy that I have read it. I didn't have to think too hard. It was just a good time. Then I read The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss, and are we surprised? I gave this fucking 5 stars. It was beautiful. I had so much fucking fun with these characters. I adore the premise of this. I love the inclusion of Sherlock with these wonderful, strong female characters, and like Sherlock. So I adore his character. He's a fucking nutter. And so having that combined with these daughters of these famous literature scientists was just brilliant. The mystery that we go on was fascinating. I was confused by the ending because I think I must have skipped over part of the audiobook, and I was like, how did we end up here? Okay, I understand where we're at, but okay, and just went with it. And I feel like it is a very easy story to just fall into. It really explores just so many interesting perspectives on stories, on narratives and narrative writing. There are definitely anecdotes which fill me with joy because yes, and it's incorporated into a way that there's the text inserting from the speaker rather than continuing on the narrative flow, and it was just so funny. It was perfect. Their dynamics are amazing and I loved it. So I'm so happy that I've finally picked this up and so excited to continue with the next book. I definitely think if you like literature in literature, this will be a good one to pick up. It also has a mystery element to it. It's got adventure. It's got women in a time that is unacceptable, breaking out of those barriers, and it was so good. And so for The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, that also fulfills one of my advents, and that is right there, which was Amy's recommendation. So let's pop that. So I need to read Master of Jin, and I've completed that because of course I can't just actually work towards getting a bingo early. Why would I do that? And then finally I finished the month on The Women of Troy by Pat Barker, and I gave this 4 stars. I didn't love this as much as Silence of the Girls just because it seemed to focus on more, not male perspective, but it had Briseis commenting on a lot more men than just Achilles and Patroclus, which I found tasteful in Silence of the Girls, but for this it just, I get it because it's like their story and these are the people that they're interacting with, but the way that it was done just didn't hit the same way as Silence of the Girls. Whilst it was still brilliantly done, I really feel like Pat knows how to write this time period and make these characters be fully fleshed individuals. I think also perhaps I didn't vibe with Pyrrhus. I don't like him and I didn't like being in his head for sections. His narrative just didn't entertain me, whereas Achilles and Patroclus, their story is one that I really treasure because I've read so many good retellings of it. Whereas Pyrrhus, I was like, please fuck off, you're an annoying little twat. Continuing with the vibes of just males fighting over chicks, but Briseis really steps it up and is a really strong, powerful character. Apologies for the angle change, I just managed to drop my book on the tripod and knock it. These are the books that I read in July. I'm really happy with the chonky side of things, even if it wasn't numerically as strong as some other months have been. And I've really had so much fun with so many of these. So let me know in the comments what your favorite book of July was. I'm so excited to hear what you read and loved, and let me know how you're going because it's a rough time for a lot of people right now, so I just want to check in and make sure you're doing okay. If you like this video, feel free to give it a big thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more of this mess, feel free to subscribe. I'll hopefully see you on my next video. Bye!